Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Motivation in That. I'm Natalie, I'm your host, and today I am really excited to be joined by Dr. George Ackerman, who reached out to me just a few weeks ago after one of the pods and, said, hey, is there space to talk about some things that I'm really passionate about? And this is the beauty of Motivation in That, is to bring things that, as you'll hear, are difficult conversations, but really important conversations to have. George and I chatted prior to this recording. We have bonded a little bit over our own experiences with loss of a parent. And I think in this time of year where we're talking about being thankful, the holiday season, it's also very important for us to tap into those of us that have gone through loss or that are advocating for change and a chance to build that momentum with those around us. So, George, thank you so much for joining. I know we're going to talk about some of your books, about your nonprofit that you have in memory of your mom, but I really want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a little about your mom. Tell us about the journey that you went on, and what you've been doing throughout this process of learning more about you, the disease that your mom had, and the trials and tribulations of advocacy as a whole.
No, I appreciate it, and thanks to you and your viewers for the time. Bringing awareness of Parkinson's disease is something close to my heart, and I've, really do in 24/7, and comes at an important time moving into the holidays where unfortunately the missing seat at our table due to Parkinson's disease, which took my mother on 1/1/22. We don't have a lot of time in many instances to talk about caregiving because I always want to talk about my mother because this is really what it's about. But a little bit about me. I'm a police officer and attorney in Florida. I'm an attorney also in DC, and I have a PhD in criminal justice. And as we spoke prior, I dedicated my whole life really to help victims of crime. I'm born in New York and now I'm in Florida. But I always felt like if individuals didn't have a voice, that someone should stand up and be a voice for them. Unfortunately, 4 years before my mother passed, my life really shifted. And not that I didn't care about victims, but my time all 100%, even more if there is possible, went to learning about Parkinson's disease, trying to be a caregiver for my mother, who was diagnosed for 15 to 18 years. But for about 7, I heard the word Parkinson. I didn't know it was a disease. I didn't really think about it because we were told by almost 15 professional medical movement specialists that you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. So for many years, she was able to live independently alone, never had any issues really. Some might have been private that she didn't tell me about. Many weren't noticeable. I think she might have been battling, inside. Not she didn't want to put a burden on us. I wish she was. But the reason I learned about it was the last 5 years she started having a lot of stiffness in her arm. She still could do things, but she had trouble cutting food when we would eat out like a family. And then the worst was she went for a trial, and not to go too far into that story, which I do write about because it's tough even today to talk about 5, 6 years later. She went for a trial for Parkinson's, and I don't know what they did. I don't blame the doctor or the university. I blame the disease. But I was called at 4 a.m. to rush over to her home the same night she got back. And I found her outside of her home moving her furniture. And I went up to her, and as a police officer, I never trained for something like this. And she said she's scared there's Nazis in her home and they're going to harm her. And as a son, someone who believed everything she said, kind of went in the house to clear it to make sure it was safe. When I did, I learned something called delusions and hallucinations, which were even more horrifying than actual symptoms of Parkinson's. So that's really where my journey began. And after that, it was, hopefully we'll be able to touch on.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that, and I know you, when we chatted, you had Parkinson's stats and data right at your fingertips. And I'm hoping you'll, share a little bit of that with us because up until, to be quite frank, Michael J. Fox's journey with it, unless it was in your home or, it ran in your family, there really weren't a lot of conversations about it, especially even, and I know we'll touch on other neurological diseases, but, you had the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. So you learned about that there. But in the background are things like Parkinson's. So tell us a little bit about Parkinson's itself, the general stats, the info, because I think, as you mentioned, there's so many, we don't know a lot about it because it's not really visible in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's approximately 1 million people in the US, but 10 million worldwide battling Parkinson's. But then if you add the millions of family members and caregivers who are also affected due to the disease, and then multiply that by the communities. And just unfortunately, there was a recent study, and they believe researchers, not me because I'm a PhD, but in criminal justice, but the actual doctors, researchers in the lab now, I've had the honor to meet and interview, have believed that it's going to go from 1 to almost 15 to 20 million people just in the US in only 15 years. So it's kind of some days tough to even advocate because I feel like I'm not doing anything, But then if we even reach one person, even today with this show, I feel we've changed the life of that individual and their family forever for the better. I had the honor to actually go to Washington, D.C. and advocate toward a cure and make sure that the halls of the Capitol in D.C. know my mother and will never forget her. And that was through the mic. I was selected out of 200 people throughout the United States by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So it was really an honor. And, I'd been doing this for 5 years since she passed and never dreamt I'd have that opportunity. But working with them closely, I've learned a lot of things that we have come not to a cure yet, but there are some positives and a lot of hope out there. There's a lot of studies. I recommend everyone out there contact, your local community, see how to participate. There's 40,000 people in something called the PPMI, which is a study through the Michael J. Fox Foundation for uh, Parkinson's patients and also to help share health and wellness throughout the country. Also, so far they've already had 4,000. I was included. You just go and they ask questions. I did something called a smell test, which thought I was not scratching and sniffing correctly, but you actually get through the nose to see if you can smell Parkinson's or to see if someone actually loses smell. It's one of the signs that you might have Parkinson's. Also, the clinical trials are the most important. There's a much more innovation now with shorter trials in the old days. There's been 10-year trials and you can't really find results through that. They also found finally the first ever biomarker a year ago, and now the goal is really, the problem is not just that everyone's journey is different, but Parkinson's affects everyone differently, so not everyone will have delusions, hallucination, but the goal, really, I've been told, is that they'd love to have a regular blood test at every doctor. And so when you get for your checkup, you'll be able to discover if you're diagnosed. And this way, you can slow the progression through sports, exercise, and hopefully get the right medication. Sometimes, unfortunately, people are misdiagnosed, and then it kind of, can end up even worse. So there are a lot of things happening, not just for people diagnosed, but for people who aren't to see if it's hereditary. But we do feel, and I do, that it's environment. So that's the biggest issue in our country. I recommend also, usually wait till the end of the show, but to contact their legislators, the local city, and everyone you can, because that's the only way we're going to prevent Parkinson's. It can be prevented. It's really, again, the pesticides they're spraying in the U.S. who have something called paraquat, which is banned in every country in almost the world except for Australia, I think, and the U.S. So the only way to ban something like that that could cause Parkinson is to write your legislators. So again, I throw the show back to you because you're it's your. Unfortunately, I have passion for this, and I can go on for hours. And just sometimes it's heartbreaking because I feel like we know the cause is likely, but we're just not doing what we need to prevent it.
Yeah, and I know that, you mentioned worldwide, the numbers are rising as well. So even with it's taking steps, right? So a
Mm.
pesticide that's known to have an interaction, very important step to take, but there are probably going to be other things that are uncovered over time with the appropriate research that's dedicated to it. And the biomarker being one that, we always talk about. It's not guaranteed in some natures because you have a biomarker that you'll get something, but it does put you at a much higher risk. So when you add environment along with some of those other genetic components, that's really it's empowering yourself in some way to then know how do you take the precautionary measures that you need to. My grandfather had Parkinson's. It was not something that was terminal for him, but it was something that I wanted, when I did those ancestry tests or those 23andMe's and they had the biomarker component, whether you believe it or not, that was one of the ones I was really interested in. I wanted to know, is this something that may kind of pass down that I needed to be aware of? So you touched on the delusions that it's not necessary that that'll be for everyone that has it. Obviously, what we're most familiar with are the tremors associated with Parkinson's. What are some of the other instances or comorbidities, as we call them in healthcare, that also are seen? You've mentioned smell. I didn't know that as one of the ones that could be a sign. Some of the other things that we should look out for or be aware of are impacts beyond just a tremor of the hand.
That's a complicated thing. It's just that my mother had more internal tremors. They have this thing show in my book. I don't know if I can find it in time, but it's almost called the iceberg, of Parkinson's, where certain levels of an iceberg over the water you can see. So you might see tremors, but then underneath there's like 20 or 30 things. So some of those symptoms of Parkinson's are small handwriting, loss of smell, trouble sleeping. My mother never slept at all. It was tough. Trouble walking, moving, but that depends again on the stage. I believe there's 5 stages. 4 and 5 are the ones where it becomes kind of tragic, because now you sometimes likely need a caregiver or someone outside to hold you and make sure that the individual doesn't fall. And that if they fall, that's even more problem. So stiffness, also soft or low voice. Constipation's a big one, which no one really wants to talk about because it's not something that's sexy or enjoyable, but it's a big problem. Also, facial masking, which is where they can't show an expression in their face. Dizziness, fainting, and sometimes stooping or hunching over. So as you can see, not an easy question or one that can be answered quickly, but those are some of the symptoms, and not everyone might show a sign in your loved one.
Yeah, so I think really important, and we're going to talk about kind of supporting individuals that might be going through some of these journeys. That when folks do start to talk about what they're experiencing, insomnia, constipation, all of those, to empower the discussions to say, "Hey, do you want me to go to the doctor with you?" Or I do think that this is something that Google can't answer for us by putting a set of checklists in. So, when you were on this journey with your mom, what were some of the things that, and it's probably a tough question, but diseases like this take away your ability to be independent in so many factors. You mentioned, having to hold someone up so that they don't fall. What were some of those components as the caregiver that you had to look out for and navigate with your mom, that were more difficult to do? Basically convincing someone, hey, you need support, and that's not something to be ashamed of, because shame comes along with, I think, some of those things that you mentioned.
Yeah, number one, I wouldn't be able. I like talking about it in a way I don't like it. I wish we didn't have to, but I don't think I'd make it every day in my life without being able to advocate, and this helps. So I appreciate again your time, friendship, past, present, and future, and all your listeners. So, it's tough. She went from the last 4 years again, someone who could walk a few miles, to then a cane for 2 years, walker, then wheelchair, and then the last 7 days was literally bedbound with only a heartbeat, which was another show for another time. So the main thing we noticed again was trouble with the arm and being able to use motor skills. One of the saddest days of my life, I hate remembering, but was the day I realized I had to take away my mother's car keys, because it wasn't just a danger to herself, but it could have been a danger to others, and that's independence. So the one I'd say worst thing in the world is the loss of independence due to Parkinson's, and she was only 69 when she passed, which to me is again something wrong with that, because she's way too young. So there are people who live till 90 or even 100 with Parkinson's. So some people are able to kind of cope with it, or it hits someone else differently. But something happened again why she progressed so quickly. But then again, I heard someone I interviewed lately, they passed at 62. So also there's something called young onset. There's a lot of misconceptions. That's a big thing, which maybe we'll get to. But it's not just an elderly white man disease. Parkinson's now, I don't know why or how, but it affects females, men, young people. Michael J. Fox was diagnosed approximately at 28 years old. So it's not like it's something that just comes around. My wife and I have the honor for the first time to head to New York City this Saturday to go to the Michael J. Fox Gala, which is going to be like something I never dreamt I'd be a part of, but a beautiful night. And in the morning, actually, it's not even the fun part at night. The whole morning we'll be at workshops with other advocates and through the foundation to get to meet people. And that's my favorite thing, to be in a room. Is I love, Zoom. I love Riverside. I love email and messenger. But when you're able to hug and cry and a little bit smile and remember, that's really what changes my life going forward, and why I think everyone out there should keep hope, because these things are happening and the wheels are turning, and we need to get our government back in track, which I heard might happen any day. But the biggest thing we ask is the funding for research, and that's kind of been stopped for the last few months. And if we get to it, could talk a little bit about the first legislation in history that ever passed last December.
Sure. So let's work our way there. You mentioned one thing I do want to highlight for anyone listening, because whether it's Parkinson's or any neurological disease or any disease, isolation is one of the big factors, right? And you mentioned when we first chatted how powerful that was to feel like you were alone and you didn't know where to look and didn't know, resources. And I know your nonprofit, Together for Sharon, has resources like that available for folks to check. So we'll make sure to link that on the description. But where else have you really found that community? And it's something that mourning together can be very powerful, but so can that injection of hope by being with others. So what has that been like to help build that community in some ways, and where can people find information on how to get involved, whether in person or virtually?
There are a lot of great organizations: Michael J. Fox Foundation, Parkinson's Foundation, American Parkinson's Disease Association, Drive Toward a Cure, Power Over Parkinson. They're all at our website. But I think what I am proud of the most is that, we thought togetherforsharon.com, I made it to remember my mother. Thought it would have 3 or 4 people, and I would have been fine with that, but over 60,000 have visited, or even more. But I feel like we kind of made our own community. What I do is odd and unique. I always say I don't want money, which is true. But I try to get other people to learn that there are organizations out there. Because when I was going through this chaos, we didn't know who to call or what to do. So it's kind of growing into something bigger than even me. The other day I was at a little event with one of the leading doctors, and I just happened to be getting a bagel as I was leaving. And some young lady, just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you with Together for Sharon?" She doesn't realize it's just me. There's no, it's not like we're big, but I'm on 24/7, even though I work and have kids. But I said, yes, I'm George. And she said she just wanted to let me know how she, appreciates all I'm doing. And that some days that are tough, or I work all day, even coming to this show, you kind of want to give up maybe, but then you see that, or then I meet you, and I realize I can't give up because there's so much more work to be done. But our website is just, again, getting, I jokingly say, out of control, because we actually, if you hit podcast, we have our own like TV station now, where I've interviewed 300 people worldwide and celebrities. Bernie Kosar, the football player. We also have a section under media where you can see magazines, TV, and I have about 20 celebrities now, from Jack Osborne, Ozzy Osbourne's son, to Brett Favre, the legendary football player. And we have messages from Muhammad Ali's daughter, just people. And I'm not, huge with celebrities, but I feel that we need everybody in this family towards a cure, because they have a, huge voice. So I'm also found on every social media, which is how we met. And I just kind of post from the heart. And, like I said, I want to stop someday, take a break, but feel like it's in my heart, a personal mission that each person like you or your viewers I meet help me keep my mother's memory alive.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, we mentioned this momentum. So where was the first legislation that you referenced a little bit? What was that? And what are some of those legislations, other than kind of banning that pesticide that was mentioned, that are in the works, or things that people can find more information on?
And luckily, in a way, I guess, because I'm a lawyer and had advocated for victims' rights, I had a little bit more knowledge and a little pushier than many who wouldn't be aware. But so, unfortunately, there was never laws or anything to support people with Parkinson's when my mother was battling. That's kind of tragic but shocking, because, again, it's so, a million people might not be a lot, but when it's your family, it is. And now, again, it's growing. So even if it's not your family, it might be a friend, a relative, and now the milkman, the UPS driver, everyone's unfortunately being affected by this disease. So It's shocking. So last December, which was, I remember I was speaking to another advocate named Allie, who's actually a spokesperson this year for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Allie Signorelli, we sent our love to her. I'll be seeing her Saturday. But we were on the phone. She was in Target, and I'll never forget when I got a call from my senator because United States Senator Rick Scott has been a big supporter of this bill, and he was on board with it. And he's been on my show, but they emailed me privately and told me the bill passed. So, National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease was the first bill in U.S. history to mention even anything with Parkinson. It took a very long time, but finally, for some reason, last year it just kind of went flying through with beautiful colors. And the only thing I could even dream of in society today that every side agreed on, whether independent, Republican, it didn't matter because we all want a cure. There's no argument. So it went past the House, past the Senate, and former President Biden signed it into law. And what it does is, number one, it helps bring more awareness, obviously, nationwide, like we've never had. Number two, it created an advisory council for going forward. Unfortunately, and I'm proud to say I had 40 nominations, which is something I don't think is unheard of, but I was really lucky. And then the third thing is to bring up issues like to ban toxics, to inform individuals, but also to provide more support. The sad news is, and again, whether it doesn't matter politics, because of the government shutdown, because the new administration cut things, they have really, it's nothing's come from last December. Now here we are. It's crazy, but it's almost the next December. So 1 year now. They haven't even started picking a board, so I'm not sure if I'm even going to be part of it. There's only one seat for a caregiver, and that's something we talked about, and I actually wrote a book on it. Sitting here right now, I don't have Parkinson's. I'm not a caregiver of someone living with Parkinson's, but I am someone who lost a loved one. And most organizations, I'd say almost all, don't have a division or council or anything for people like me. And I also implore and ask them to start when they haven't yet, or if they even considering it, because they have things they're busy. But I dream of the day where there is a council or some type of section in these organizations, even Michael J. Fox. I'll even help run it, but for people like me, because I feel there's probably 80 million or more people who lost someone, might not realize it, might have moved on, which is okay. But a lot of us still have a voice and don't want our loved one to be forgotten. I don't see why we don't. So that's why I started Together For Sharon, why I'm really proud of it. We're able to kind of weave our own way, make our own stand, and no one tells me what to do or has any way to stop me from advocating until there's a cure. So, a lot of unfortunate organizations have policies and have this and that. Can't have red tape in this. There's no, I go on shows and ask people to come on mine to promote them. It's like the weirdest thing in 2025. I don't allow them to give me anything. I don't want anything. I just want that one person, man, female, family, sitting in Alaska or sitting in New Jersey or Chicago that's going through this now and not aware of anything. If there's any way somehow they see my show or learn about something, they can go on togetherforsharon.com completely free. There's no catch. And they can read about things for free. They can connect with other people. I have interviewed over 2,000 people. So if you go to Together for Sharon, click interviews, you can actually find other people around the world that are battling, advocates, doctors, nurses, and most of them put their information. You don't have to talk to me if you don't. You can literally just reach out to them, and there's nothing, in my opinion, like that in the world.
Yeah, and what you mentioned is just the importance of advocacy, that in times of something may pass or get enacted or go into place, but it doesn't mean that advocacy stops, especially when we have a lot of noise from the outside impacting things. So love that you touched on that. And I do want to go to what you really hit on, which was, just because your mother is no longer here, it doesn't mean you're not still impacted by everything you experienced. And some of your books, the way that you have, really navigated through the grief And I think not just specific to the caregiver Parkinson's journey, but you have a book called Men Grieve Too, Policing in Parkinson's Disease, which never even crossed my mind, but tapping into that background. And so I think they, being able to see that whole spectrum and understand there are so many intricacies of how this all comes up. And I'd love to just, as we kind of get into the wrap up of some of this, what has that been like for you? I know when we talked before, you mentioned it was just kind of spilling out of you. And sometimes, it's hard, but it does help to kind of get it somewhere. And it is something for people to be able to reflect on and learn from, based on what their focus areas are. So you just don't have to, read one person's story, but there's elements of that story that really can cross over for others.
Yeah, I didn't want to write books on this, but what I noticed is while I was advocating, I saw a lack of information or even awareness for certain topics. And I'm proud to say, in just a year or two, written about 7 or 8 books. I'm probably cutting, might not, I don't want to say never, but I don't have any more. And I do have next year, we're planning to release a children's book. And again, all these books come from my experiences and my frustration. I have 3 children. They were babies and young when my mother was sick and passed, but now today they ask me why is grandma not here, and I don't even know what to say. So we put together a beautiful animation book for children, and I just can't wait. I don't really talk much about it yet, but a lot of the stuff I end up sending out free. We probably spent $50,000 sending books free around the world. It's just I can't keep doing that, and it's self-publishing's tough, but a lot of publishers don't know Parkinson's or just don't want to take a risk, sadly, which is another part of the problem, in addition to the media. But they are starting to come around. But again, you brought up one that means a lot to me as a police officer. I was thinking, people with Parkinson, some, they have tremors, and if they're pulled over or stopped by law enforcement, they're often miscalculated or misinformed and aren't aware. Because in the academy, they don't mention Parkinson's, they mention dementia and Alzheimer's. And I don't think police can know everything, but just knowing the word Parkinson's disease, that's it. That's all I have my dream. Well, they could mistaken it for DUI, drugged while driving, many other things. And my fear, and I try to be proactive, not reactive, is that a life might be lost mistakenly. And that's why I wrote that book. I do have an exciting announcement that my department, where I am, Lantana, Florida, purchased 250 books and now donated them to the entire community. I have my assistant chief coming on my show for the first time, and also the mayor of Lantana. So the support is incredible. Another officer, I gave 4 speeches in my department, thinking, it's great, that'll be it. But one of the officers actually came up to me in private and started crying. I asked what happened, and they lost their grandfather who raised them. They're like their father due to Parkinson's. So now it's almost like it empowers people because she's like me, I think, and we're just getting to know each other. She'll be on my show. She wants to put a walk on for Together for Sharon, in memory again of all those we've lost. And she actually has the people and knowledge to put the whole thing together without me. So when we join forces, I think this is going to be huge. I've never spoken about it, and it's just it could be a beautiful day. And if it becomes something, I hope it does. We could do it every year. Problem is, I like to still again go to other organizations' walks. So now I'm going. It's going to be too many walks for George. But I love supporting other organizations. But I think it's time that we also start our own actual live events. So.
Sure. And what you mentioned, I think, is beautiful. And that was one of the things I wanted to make sure we closed on, which is that this isn't a competition about, which neurological disease deserves to be solved or cured first, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, whatever those dementia. But it is really, as we unlock information about one, we may unlock information about others because of how kind of interwoven a lot of these diseases and diagnoses can be. So that idea of coming together and understanding that if we build these silos, we're really not doing much other than splitting, the penny 20 different ways, or, splitting the baby up. And instead being able to understand what the partnership of this looks like, and how back to that piece of having a village to support really is important. And everyone's journey has probably been very unique, whether it be who they were or how they were impacted. But in the end, we're all tied to this desire to to find a cure, to find a better path forward to ease the pain of those that are involved. So George, as we wrap up here, again, we're going to make sure everyone has the information on this podcast for how to get all of the resources that were mentioned and where to find more information. But what is one thing that you would like people to walk away from this episode remembering? What's that kind of nugget, that takeaway for them?
And the main thing is you're not alone. Individuals like me and Natalie will be right by your side, advocating until there's a cure. And if you follow me on all the social media, if you go to Together For Sharon, go scroll on the main page. There's a little, look like a Christmas tree. If you click that, it'll take you to all my different social media. But even I'm just excited. But even Saturday, if you watch, I'm going to be coming live with Dennis Leary, Nikki Glacier, John Stewart, Jackson Brown, Michael J. Fox will be there. His wife Tracy Poland. So it's going to be, even if it doesn't cost anyone anything, just to join me on social media, and you're going to definitely be wowed. You'll see some fun stuff, but I do it all to make sure my mother's not forgotten, but also in her memory and all those we've lost, to make sure that those battling today and their families don't have to ever go through this or what my family did. And I'm not going to lie, like some of the toughest days are coming, so the holidays. Thanksgiving is not easy. We used to keep a seat, an empty seat at the table, and not to be but this is actually the cover of, this is actually our seat, same one. All my books are from my family's pictures and things, but it's not going to be easy. It never is. I still remember the last one. I don't even think I ate. It was sickening, but there is hope. There's a lot of amazing things. There's research, and you don't have to just take my word for it. Follow some of these incredible organizations which I support, like the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And like they say, they'll be there until there's a cure. So we're all going to be out there fighting for you. And not, again, it doesn't take any cost really. If you want to donate, great. If not, just join us on social media and you'll literally be up to date. You could come visit me at some of the walks and we'll hug each other, we'll cry together, but we'll definitely be inspired, because each and every one of you inspires me. Thank you.
Well, George, thank you so much for coming on, sharing this story that I know is hard for you. And I just want to say a thank you to your mom for raising such a just dedicated, passionate individual that keeps her legacy going, and throughout it is creating your own legacy in so many ways, as someone that other caregivers, other survivors who have lost someone can lean on and not be alone during their own journey. So I thank you so much. We are going to get this out promptly for folks so that they can tune in on Saturday while you are able to share from that awesome event. And hopefully, folks, if you have questions, or again, you've mentioned a lot of ways to get in touch with you or others, that they'll reach out and do that. So thank you again, and really appreciate everything that you and your organization and those that you work with are doing.
Thank you.